Hello and welcome to Rugby England. My name is Andy Brown. You may know me because I'm the guy that last year went around the major leagues painting all 30 ballparks, like the one you can see up over here. I have painted ballparks in over 9 different countries. I've painted over 90, but due to the current crisis, the current pandemic, I have found myself grounded and I am here in my parents' hut, which I've now turned into my painting studio over the last 6 months. I'm here tonight because I'm going to be part of the Negro League Baseball Museum's art project, which is starting this coming weekend. For the project, I've decided I want to complete one of my Dream Team pieces like I did earlier in the pandemic, which are behind me over here, that you can see there. Because it seems to me that the Negro Leagues players, their achievements, their feats, their stories are not talked about that much. And even myself as a baseball fan, I don't know much outside of the big names. So what I want to do is make some videos where we can go through all the players that are, or the best players, and kind of look at what they achieved, their interesting stories, who they were, where they come from, and hopefully learn a little bit more. So that's the aim of this project. And to help me with that, I've got some experts from the SABR Negro Leagues Committee who are going to be joining me to educate me and educate hopefully you a little bit on who these great players were and why they deserve to be recognised and remembered. What I would need is, I'm going to need, after you've watched the video today, to go to my Twitter page, which is @AndyBisAnArtist, and vote for which of the 3 players you want to see onto the bare canvas, which is going to come out tomorrow morning. I am going to have 3 players for every position, and on Twitter there's going to be a poll where you'll vote for which one you want to see on the canvas. Okay, well, thank you very much. As you can see, I've got 3 wonderful experts on the Negro Leagues in front of us. We have Mr. Ted Knorr. Is it Knorr, sorry, or is it Knorr?
Knorr.
Ted Knorr, sorry, that's right. We've got Leslie Heaphy, and we've got Jim Overmyer. So thank you very much, all 3 of you, for joining me today. If I could just ask you just to go around and just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Okay. Well, I'm a SABR member for 41 years. Unlike these other 2 who are preeminent authors, I'm not an author. In fact, I consider myself more a fan than anything else. But I am rather proud of the fact that I founded the only conference dedicated to the study of the Negro Leagues, and we should be meeting for the 21st time next year in Birmingham.
Wow.
And on that topic, I'm mostly associated now with the Significant Contest, which I now host, and both of these 2 fine people have placed very well in that contest.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. How about you, Leslie?
So I'm Leslie Heaphy, and I'm a history professor at Kent State University at Stark. And in addition to that, I am also a SABR member. I've been a SABR member. I'm thinking about what Ted said. So I've been a SABR member for 32 years, so just a little bit behind. And I'm also currently the vice president of SABR, and I'm the chair of the Women in Baseball Committee for SABR, and I write on the Negro Leagues on women's baseball, and often those 2 intersect very nicely.
Thank you. And Jim?
I'm Jim Overmyer. I have been a SABR member for 35 years, so I'm all in the middle, in the gap here. This is my gap year. I have written, what Ted does is very important. We've been to Harrisburg for 2 Negro League conferences, and they were both fantastic. And there are a lot of people interested in Negro League baseball now. You don't just write about it, you get involved. So that's all a good thing. I've written some books on the Negro Leagues, primarily biographies of 2 owners, Cumberland Posey of the Homestead Grays and F. Manley of the Newark Eagles. And I've done, I don't know, contributed to other people's books, and we all help each other out with research and stuff like that. I was a member of the Hall of Fame Special Committee in 2006, as was Leslie. She left that out. Maybe she meant to. I don't know.
No, I just forgot.
a long time ago, who elected the last, 17 en masse, the last 17
That's quite a responsibility.
Negro League people to the Hall of Fame.
Huge responsibility.
Pardon?
A big responsibility doing such a thing.
It was at the time.
Yeah.
And if the Hall had allowed it to continue, not necessarily with us, but with somebody, it would have been even better. It occurs to me it's been 14 years since that enshrinement, and of course no more have gotten in, which is a real shame.
Long overdue. Maybe with the 100th year celebrations, maybe things can start changing for that. Hey,
we hope so. Yeah.
Okay. So today we're talking about our first 3 suggested outfielders. We've got Oscar Charleston, we've got Chino Smith, and we've got Petehill. So let's talk about Oscar Charleston. And let's just talk a little bit about him generally and kind of what we feel were his main attributes, his main strengths as an athlete, and anything where you feel like he's most recognizable or most deserving.
Well, that's basically everything. He couldn't pitch. That was about it. I think, and a lot of other people think, but I think that Charleston was the best position player in the Negro Leagues. He was an outstanding center fielder until he got a little girth on him and got a little old, and then he was an outstanding first baseman. He, as a manager, as a player, he was, at least as a part-timer, he was in black baseball for 27 years. He's still playing in his 40s. He started out in 1915. He was still playing in the 1940s. He managed his lifetime. Seamheads.com has a Negro League database. I think they're the best source of Negro League statistics. And one of the nice things they do to sort of make them understandable to people are normalize them over 162 game season, so you can sort of compare them to National League and American League production. Obviously, there are a lot of factors you have to take into account, but it's a nice line to look at. Oscar's 162 game line is 22 homers, 135 RBIs, 46 stolen bases, a 350 batting average, and a 1.003 on base plus slugging percentage. You don't really get much better than that. If there was in fact some sort of discounting factor, had he had a chance to play in the major leagues, he'd still be a 300 hitter with a bunch of home runs and everything else. He's a great player.
Yeah, quite incredible. Hey, I saw that Bill James said he was one of the fourth best of all time. I think he said, and that was behind Ruth, Honus Wagner, and Willie Mays. So I think that says a lot for his abilities.
And this year, Joe Poznansky, another reputed great baseball author, now he ranks him 5th because he puts Barry Bonds in front of him. And Bonds, of course, brings a little bit of baggage there. I'd still take Charlie, but the point is two researchers 20 years apart both put Charleston in the 5 best of all time.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's also known, what I always think about when I think about Charleston is not only his incredible hitting and all of those kind of things, but nobody seemed to have had the spirit that Charleston did to want to win and to do whatever it took. I mean, he had a reputation, certainly, of being a little bit of, but it was all predicated on his desire to win. And when you look at some of the teams that he managed, and I was looking up earlier because I was kind of curious and I didn't know exactly, but again, according to Seamheads, I would agree with Jim, that's not only in his managing, I looked at the years that he was credited as managing the different teams that he did, and he was manager, of course, of the 35 Crawfords, who are considered probably one of the best teams ever, and they beat the Cubans that year. But in 13 of his years of managing, his teams came in 1st or 2nd. 13 out of the, and some of those years he's a player manager. He's not just, so he translated his own skills into being able to teach players as well. And of course he goes on to scout later as well. So I think that rounds out the package when you think about Charleston.
Absolutely. I've got a question for you all about it might be a bit of a general question to do with the Negro Leagues, but when looking at these players, one thing that struck me with quite a few players is they played for so many teams. Like Charleston, it seemed, played for over a dozen teams. And of course, they were playing in the winter leagues in Cuba, Dominican, Puerto Rico, and so on. But just in America, they were playing in so many teams. Could you explain, like, why was that so? Is that common, and why? Like, what would be the reasons for it?
It was very common, and part of the reason, and then is certainly the economic issues that were present, particularly between the regular season and the winter seasons, just making ends meet, needing to, and then teams came and went, and even though there were contracts, contrary to what lots of people think, that didn't necessarily mean players stuck with those, and there were issues that came up and they got offered opportunities. So when those opportunities came, players moved from team to team as teams moved around. And so I think those are some of the certainly economic explanations.
All right, gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
And also in injuries, there was no designated list. So if you got injured, it might not be you leaving the team might leave you. As we'll talk about tomorrow, my favorite player, Rap Dixon, you can see a lot of jumping in his career, but a lot of that was he was very injury prone, and sometime the team wasn't there when he got back to playing.
All right.
One of the things was there never was in the Negro Leagues an overarching commissioner of black baseball, like Rob Manfred or Bud Selig or Bartlett Giamatti. The two leagues had their own organizational structures, but they coexisted with each other through a sort of sensitive diplomatic relationship, which did not always preclude a team in one league from enticing away a player from a team in the other league. A lot of these switches, not all of them, but a lot of them are inter-league switches where everybody got all excited, but nobody could really do anything about it. And financial problems for the teams sometimes happen. Charleston came to Pittsburgh to play for the Homestead Grays, who then got into a terrible financial bind during the middle of the Depression. And Charleston picked up his bat and went across town and played for the Pittsburgh Crawfords, whose owner had a lot of money at the time. And it just happened.
Is that why I noticed in some notes that I saw that in 1932, apparently the Crawfords played as an independent team? Is that why they were in that situation, because it was financial after the Depression, or?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Les.
I see.
No, I was just going to say yes, and that's partly because the other leagues went out of existence, and before the next leagues essentially started up, there was only one league that managed to survive, I guess you could say, during that period, and so the economic situation, the Great Depression.
All right. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much. So that's Oscar Charleston. Let's move on to Chino Smith. So Chino Smith, born 1901, he died in 1932. So what should we say about him?
Well, I think you've already covered the biggest thing in his career, and that's his early death. He only played 7 years, but he has, if you require 1,000 at-bats, Chino Smith has the best batting average, best on-base percentage, best slugging percentage, best OPS, and best OPS plus among all the 9 outfielders we're going to talk about.
Oh, okay.
But the shortness of his career makes his counting numbers, they're not like the rate numbers. So that's the biggest factor about Chino Smith is his short career.
There are three players in my mind who, if their careers hadn't been cut drastically short, would probably have upset how we think about the best black players and probably your list today and how we would have voted on it. And Chino Smith is one of them. He was an outstanding player. He was nearly per seam heads, he was nearly a 400 hitter in his Negro League career. He died of stomach and pancreatic cancer in the off season between 31 and 32, I think. And that was it for him. But if he had had a normal career, even with the ordinary decline phase in the late 30s, I think we'd be thinking very differently about, maybe with the exception of Charleston, about who the best outfielders in the Negro Leagues had been. But that's the way it goes.
Mm.
He'd be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame as well.
That
and
too.
I would simply add, everybody who talked about Chino, and when you go back and look through articles of interviews with players from Cool Papa Bell, who we're going to talk about here in a moment, and others, they all talked about he could hit anything. It didn't matter what it was, what was thrown at him. And that when the pitchers, I think this was when the pitchers tended to taunt him or somebody or the fans or anything, that actually gave him greater incentive to hit. And he got better when, instead of, for a lot of people, you take that and you internalize it, and it seems like, at least according to the interviews and things, that for Chino, it did the exact opposite. And he became a better hitter under those, if you can even imagine, under those circumstances, as if he had something to prove all the time. Mm. and knew that he could do it. You hear stories of him, not quite Ruthian, that I can pinpoint where I'm going to hit my home run, but telling player, having bets that he's going to go up and he'll hit a home run and winning $10 for doing that and things like that. And so the competitive spirit in him seems to have been alive and well all the time.
Mm. So if it wasn't for his early death, he would have been a surefire Hall of Famer, I guess, because he's the only player that we're talking about who actually isn't in the Hall of Fame. But again, looking at his stats and just his story, and what you just said, it's obvious that he was, something else.
Satchel Paige is supposed to have said that Chino Smith was one of the two toughest outs he ever faced, and Paige, basically, I don't know, he didn't give hitters a lot of credit, so ordinarily.
Andy, I just want to add one more thing. We're talking about 9 outfielders. There is one other that's not in the Hall of Fame, and of course that's Rap Dixon.
Yes, that's later on. We'll talk about him another time. Hey, but yeah, exactly. We'll make sure we focus on that. Okay, so that is Chino Smith, and then our last player for the outfield in round 1 we've got is Petehill. Petehill, I'll just tell you a little bit about him from my notes here. Born 1882, and he died in 1951. What can we say about Petehill?
An exceptional fielder. I mean, just to me, so Ted's favorite player is Rap Dixon, mine is Petehill and Mule Subtle. Wow. Those are my two favorite. For a variety of reasons, but I was always and with Petehill, what impressed me, I mean, he can hit, and but he appears to have been an incredible outfielder. He had the speed, he had the arm, and just the canny sense of knowing where to play. And so I was always impressed. Posey put him on his all-time all-star team. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to argue with that in terms of looking at when Jim Riley wrote his encyclopedia, and he was talking about if you created a pre-1920 outfield, it would have been Cobb, Speaker, and Petehill. That's pretty good company to keep in terms of where you stand. And so unfortunately for Pete, for a lot of people not knowing much about him, the vast majority of his career was pre-1920. So it's pre-Negro Leagues. And so that's why a lot of people don't know much about him, but it did not prevent him being elected to the Hall of Fame. And so
when you say he's pre-Negro Leagues, why is that such an obstacle, you think? Is it the record keeping that was different then in the earlier section, or why would that be a thing? It's
the record keeping, but it's also the interest that people have had to go back and put together the records, because it's easier when you can pinpoint and say, all right, here are the official Negro League teams. They joined a league. Everything before that, right? There are no leagues. They're all independent teams. So there's an even greater question about who they were playing and all of those, and trying to put together any kind of, there's no season in that sense, like that you can put together and say, here are the games. And so that makes it much harder when you're thinking about the pre-1920.
So it's more like, would it be more like not pickup games necessarily, but it'd be more like a casual or just an irregular season, I guess, more? Or
irregular season between the best, well, and other teams too. But the best teams played each other, but they made up their, I guess you could say, schedules as they go along. They didn't make them up every spring and then kind of stick to them. But they did. The best teams did play each other, so we still see these pre-1920, pre-organized league best players as best players. Although it is true, out of 35 members of the hall who have Negro League or who are elected because of their Negro League or pre-Negro League achievements, if you count Hill as a pre-guy, I guess he's a half. So there's only 2.5 out of the 35. They're kind of underrepresented, but the truth is, you know, if you've got to be choosy, and of course you are, if you're putting people into any sort of best of list, and the people who played after the Negro Leagues were founded tend to get the most attention. They got the most press in the papers. Their statistics are better. That's better with something of a quotations around it, because there's problems with all the black statistics in terms of getting them complete. So yeah, the pre-Negro League guys are kind of underrepresented. They are.
One other point on Pete Hill, because obviously these two esteemed historians are correct about playing before the league. The microscope was not as severe, but it also was the dead ball era. Mm-hmm. And Pete Hill, his OPS, on base plus slugging, ranks 20th among all Negro League outfielders. But his OPS plus, which is why Leslie is such a big fan, puts him 6th. Wow. You know, so when you adjust for the style of play and the hitting capabilities given the ball and the fields, Pete Hill looks like a remarkable hitter as opposed to a very good hitter.
Well, and when they average out his over 162 game season, they have him hitting 324. Who wouldn't take it?
That's right.
I mean, and a 460 slugging percentage.
Yeah, but 21 outfielders hit higher than that, and 25 hit slugged higher. He loses out because of the era in which he plays and the style of game.
Yep.
Interesting. One last question, which may be a real stupid one, but here he's down as John Preston Pete Hill. Why was he called Pete Hill? Like, why do we, even his plaque at the Hall of Fame, I think, is Pete Hill. Why is he known as Pete? Do we know?
I don't know that we know, but we do know a little bit about how his name ends up on his plaque. And I would defer to one of these two people who were there. They might know the answer, because his name was a bit controversial on his plaque. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Does anybody know that? Why?
Oh.
Well,
some players acquired nicknames that weren't their real names. He's hardly the only one. But
he was almost always, once he turned up in the papers, past a certain point, referred to as Pete Hill. And then some of the papers referred to him as JP, and sometimes they referred to him as J Hill. And so there was a variety. And of course, Hill is not an uncommon name. And so, and from where he was from, trying to track down, and it appears that there were some questions about birth certificate and things like that led to the initial issues, and then it got corrected to make sure that we now believe to be his real name was John Preston Pete Hill.
But Andy, just, I don't know the answer, but I think it's an important point. Why he's called Pete, I don't know. But the name that was put on his plaque in 06, as Leslie mentioned here, has been corrected. So there was a bigger mystery about his name than just why is he called Pete. And it's been corrected now, not without some controversy.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Well, look, thank you very much. That is our first round of Negro League outfielders that we're going to discuss. Thank you very much for your time. And thanks for being here. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our conversation with our three superb experts there. I hope you learned a lot. What I need you to do now is go to my Twitter page, which is @AndyBisAnArtist, and there you'll see a poll where you can vote for whichever of the three players you feel deserves to be painted onto the canvas. So please head over to there now. I'll put a link to it below this video, and wherever you are and wherever you're watching, I hope you're safe and well, and please stay tuned for the next one of these, which will be coming very, very soon. Thanks for your help. Take care. Goodbye.